Welcome. This is Rising from the Ashes. I'm Anna Klint, your guide here to help you transform 2020's sometimes quite painful lessons into deep healing for you and the planet. I'm so thrilled to have with us today Steve Hoskinson. Steve is the founder, the CEO, and the CCO, the Chief Compassion Officer of Organic Intelligence. And he has trained literally thousands of trauma therapists, health professionals, mindfulness experts, and teachers. Steve not only walks his talk, but he is going to talk the walk with us today. So I'm really excited about that. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Anna, for having me.
So I have one question I'm starting off with for everybody, which is if you had one word to describe 2020, and that could be for you personally, it could be globally, it could be in your work, in any lens, what would your one word for 2020 be?
Yeah, it really, you had mentioned, I really wondered, there's so many words because 2020 was just so off the chain. But I'm going to go, what came, challenge. And sometimes we use the word challenge as oh, I'm challenged, because we don't want to say the word problem or something like that. But really, I feel like there's fully as much opportunity as peril in 2020. It's just that it seemed like the stakes were higher. So the challenge to awakening, the challenge to white supremacy, the challenge to the status quo, everything was in there, and it offers us an opportunity to grow into something bigger, really. And I think your work and these kinds of events reflect that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. The stakes were definitely higher this year. It felt like, whoa. Another one of our guests yesterday, Nadine McNeil, was talking that, it was like the 2020 was like do or die. It's time to go. You're going to get on this bus.
Yeah, there was a lot of both, wasn't there?
Yeah.
With the pandemic and
quite literally.
Right.
Quite literally. And so why do you suppose this is so challenging? This idea of challenge, in 2020?
Oh, well, it's just it's novel, it's new. And we have lived in this is just sort of normal living. We find a way to get along in our world and in our life, and we create patterns of behaving and living and moving and changing and navigating the current circumstance. And then if the current circumstance changes, then we have to adapt. We have to change ourselves. And that itself is a challenge, because change and adaptation means extra intensity. And I think it shows us whether I have the spare capacity, like the bandwidth to face extra intensity, or I don't. And people's livelihoods have fallen apart in many ways. I train therapists, and so many of my therapists are coming back and saying, people are having unprecedented collapses and decompensations, and the number of calls to the Child Protective Services, and right there is, people are just, we call it COVID fatigue or something, or quarantine fatigue, but that really speaks to what we look at in OI, which is about threshold. Like, how much of my bandwidth is taken up, and when it's taken up and it starts to go over, then we're boiling over, and then symptoms show up and acting out shows up. And all of that is around just having more intensity than my system can handle.
Yeah, I love that you're using that word bandwidth and really kind of painting a picture about that. It would have been enough if it was just the pandemic, but it was so many other things. It was all the stuff going on in the climate. It was all the civil unrest. It was like 2020 threw the book at us. And we just, and like you said, like, we are creatures of habit, and we develop patterns of moving through the world that are based on a certain set of givens. And 2020 was like, no, those givens are not going to apply this year. Right. And yeah, bandwidth, talk about limited bandwidth. It's pretty amazing, actually. How well maybe some of us actually did do relative to what it could have been. And that really, this was such an interesting year for that. I'm
Well,
curious.
and
Go ahead.
and it's not over, right? I
Right.
mean, we're not done with 20 yet. We don't know,
That's
you
right.
know, and the challenges
That's
are
right.
ongoing. They're not just going away.
That's true.
So, you know,
That's true.
global climate change is ongoing. It's going to create that
That's right.
challenge. We find, like in the United States, the electorate and the civil polarization, the economic polarization. You know,
Yeah.
some of this was happening because of the pandemic. Some of this is self-inflicted. You know,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so much of this then we bear responsibility
Yeah.
for and have to develop strategies of coping and developing resilience, and
That's right.
including building relationship among highly polarized perspectives and positions among people.
Yes, absolutely. I so agree with you. 2020, we've been talking about it as, clear vision, being able to see things for really how they are. And we got to see how many systems are not working. We got to see, I mean, we've been seeing in America like this polarization for quite some time, but
Right.
it became so intense and still is intense about even just things like wearing masks. I will or I won't. And just how much our culture has really turned away from communication and seeing the other person with compassion. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure we're going to talk more about that, but
Yeah.
that is one of the things that really came clear, and that came through very, very clearly in terms of social justice this year,
Yeah. Right.
when we just blew when the lid was blown off of things that we have been like, yeah, this is a problem, this is a problem, this has been going on, this is a problem. It's like, oh wow, I've actually been contributing to this problem.
Right. Right.
Holy shit. So
Right. Yeah.
so yeah, we got served in that way. And so I think about 2020 as, and I agree, like, just because the new year comes, we're not flipping a switch and we're not going back to something that we've had before. And we're still not really fully out of this, but we have an opportunity here, a great opportunity. Like you said, opportunity, but there's peril, depending on which, one of my other guests described 2020 as a choose your own adventure. Like which way are you gonna, which way are you gonna choose?
Yeah,
But
like Russian roulette kind of
right,
choosing, you
high
know.
stakes, choose your own
Right,
adventure.
right.
Right. Yeah, you're gonna pick the blue pill or the red pill. Either one or both might be arsenic. I don't know. Totally. So 2020 was like this crucible that we've all been going through together. It's like trial by fire. And this series is all about changing perception, elevating human consciousness so that we can grow and evolve into some next iteration of humanity. From your perspective, the work that you do, I would love to hear through your lens, like, who do you think we collectively are being asked to become through this experience, this shared experience of 2020?
Yeah. Well, as we think about compassion, which is it's really a no-brainer. I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, "My religion, is kindness," and
Yeah.
that's super, of course, beautiful and clear, and compassion is sometimes people have it, across all strata of society. Some just seem to have that blessing of compassion. And we work from organic intelligence at the standpoint of the biology. And I think looking from that perspective is key, because if people don't feel safe, they don't have, if their own biology is registering as under survival threat,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to then bump up into like love and compassion.
Yes.
So in some ways, the movement toward safety, and if you hear people and on both sides of the political spectrum in the United States saying, "Oh, our way of life is at risk," and people feeling like, "Oh, I need to do whatever it takes to fight against those that are threatening our livelihood, our safety, our well-being, our way of life, or something, a democracy, however, whatever that's a code for. So, so I think somehow safety has to come in there and somehow confront the notion of scarcity. Like there's
Yes.
too little economic support, there's too little emotional support, there's too little support for order and authority that can maintain order, or whatever it is that signals people's systems to go into fight, flight, and freeze.
Mm-hmm.
We have to begin to address those. And we talked about the polarization in terms of economic polarization. So that's a first place as we think about the pandemic, and
Yeah.
so many people out of work. That's a
Mm-hmm.
huge concern. So I think to think very practically about this, we're creating like a coaching program that we want to make available for people as a means of getting capital. And when we look at justice and social justice, a big part of that is like capital access, because
Yeah.
capital and political power go together in our system.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's the practical aspect of that, and then to work from the standpoint of the biology and create the opportunity for the biology to realize safety and well-being somehow within oneself. That is, not to ignore the outer circumstances that need change. That's legit. That
Yeah.
practical is primal, but also to be able to find the work that within our own biology allows my system to communicate messages of it's okay. There's well-being. There's trustworthiness
Mm-hmm.
around something, and that'll lend itself to compassion, I think.
I so agree with you. I have this kind of based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's kind of like a spiritual, I call it my soul flame chart. And it's so true that you can't get to these elevated levels until you are really managing your central nervous system. You really have to be retraining your brain, because we know from epigenetics that these external and internal, so our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, as well as what's happening around us, are working on our biology. And that it's so fundamental to get to create, to forge, to support being able to go into that rest and repair stage. And because we cannot get to compassion, like I can't see you as my brother, as my friend, as a non-threat, if I am constantly in fight or flight. And that really is like where it feels like we are as a culture here in America, is we are in this adversarial position all the time. And so yeah, so I hear you, like we are being called to become more compassionate, but we're being called to do some work so that we can get to that place, so we can create that safety. I love how you're framing that.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, spot on.
And the compassion that is for oneself and for others, and that I think it's Reverend Angel who says, like compassion, and for oneself and others. This is justice work, right?
Yeah.
That compassion and social equity are not different. These are the same things, and so compassion for myself and others has everything to do with what are people's lives like, and what are the circumstances in which we live. Can we walk out onto the street and not fear
Mm-hmm.
for for being shot or arrested, or for driving while black or something, right?
Right, sure. And now today, can I go outside without fearing that I'm going to be infected?
Right.
It's like even just having, like, I talked about this with Maureen St. Germain, just like having a sense within yourself, that creating that safe space within yourself to say, like, I am doing what I need to do to be safe, and therefore I am going to move through the world as though I am safe. And the messaging of 2020 was like, you're not safe. You're never going to be safe.
Yeah.
Wash your hands, wear a mask, don't touch your face. That'll keep you safe. But it's like, well, actually, like there's a whole other level of safety that we can be empowering ourselves with. And it has to do with mindset, it has to do with heart set, has to do with, you know, any number of different things. But yes, I believe I am so with you on this notion that self-compassion or self-love is justice work. It's revolutionary to practice self-compassion, self-love, and from that place of self-compassion, compassion just happens just naturally. Like you just, if you are feeling compassion towards yourself, no matter if you effed up at work, lost your job, are gonna, you know, all these other things are going wrong, no matter what, if you can still come back to a place of compassion and worthiness, you can extend that so much more easily towards the world around you. And I really feel like it's a linchpin in all of this.
Yeah. Oh, well, it is. And you know, as you mentioned, like pandemic and other threats, you know, the one of the challenges and opportunities, I think, for those of us in this sort of healing, self-development side of things is then the opportunity and challenge of coming into realization of our mortality
Yes.
and the recognition of our mortality. And that somehow, you know, there was this very famous book called The Denial of Death by Becker, more in the analytic terms, but saying that so much of our problems are around really denying our finitude and our mortality. And so somehow this opportunity to come into a recognition of my finitude, of my limit, of my something about even my powerlessness and my mortality in there, that's all been the bailiwick of spirituality, and something in there is possible, I think, for our growth and evolution as we face and accept and really embrace our limitations, including our mortality.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing we definitely, you know, had to brush up against this year, right? Was with the pandemic, you know, our mortality and that interconnectedness, you know, of that our mortality could be linked to someone else's mortality as well. And and
Quite
how,
literally.
yeah, you know, it's like when we are constantly pushing that away, like we don't get to harness the limits of our life to fuel us into, you know, perhaps stepping into some greater aspect of ourselves, whether that's stepping into our purpose or just living in a more integrous or aligned way, right? If it's like, well, I can always do it tomorrow. What if
Yes.
we can't always do it tomorrow? Like, what if this is it?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and
Yeah.
to have that focus, I think the samurai would sometimes be advised to do this. Like they would
Yeah.
do their practice, they would do their kata, and then they would be advised to, one, carry their mortality with them
Yes.
every
Yeah.
day, and it
Totally.
sharpens and hones the value and preciousness of each moment and each encounter and each,
Mhm.
you know, beloved that is really all around us.
Yeah, that's so true. You reminded me of that movie, and I can't remember what it's called right now, where Forrest Whitaker is like a samurai in Brooklyn or the Bronx or something like that, or I don't know if it was Philly, maybe it was Philadelphia, and oh gosh, and uh, the musical score was so great in that film. I can't remember what it's
Huh.
called. So
I'm
anyway,
gonna look it up now. That's great.
yeah, no, it's a great movie. He plays this urban samurai.
Huh.
And I have the soundtrack for it. It's just escaping me. It'll come to me after we're done.
It will come. Yeah.
But it's a great film from, I don't know, probably about 15 to 18 years ago.
Nice.
Um, so, okay, so it's all well and good to talk about that we need to practice compassion. We need to confront scarcity. We need to create safe space for our biology. But how do we do all these things? And, you know, you and I absolutely come from this space that says it is our past trauma that is interrupting our biology, that is creating dis-ease, discomfort, a lack of satisfaction in our lives. And this could be to varying degrees from mild to extreme. But how, you know, in the light of your trauma work, like how do we do all those things? How do we do it? How do we create the new earth?
Yeah, it's so nice the framing of your question. How do we create the new earth? And the way that really like our connection to the earth really is through this body that we are and have. And so for me, it begins really with the a new understanding of how to understand and approach trauma. That is, it's really pointed to now and being more widely accepted, the ACEs studies, right? And these
Yes,
ACEs
totally.
studies, the Adverse Childhood Experiences
Hmm.
study shows that the early trauma and early deprivation, neglect and assault on little people creates disturbance in biology. So it
Yes.
increases incidence of, say, cancer, lung disorder, and causes of death. So the notion of trauma as being psychological is, it's psychological and it is psychophysiological, but
Hmm.
it's primarily biological.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to work with trauma, then we really have to understand the foundations of
Hmm.
how our biology works. And that's the specialty really of organic intelligence, and
Hmm.
understanding the language of the neurobiology, and finding that there is a very specific pathway in positive psychology for the biology to be self-healing or self-organizing or auto-organizing. And
Yes.
so I think this is really key, because we're mostly told that we have to do certain things to heal ourselves, but that misses really a systems framework, which says it has so much to do with the environment. It's for sure the emotional, cognitive environment, but it's also the physical environment, and how, in particular, my attention relates to the environment, and how I choose my environments is also key. Because
Hmm.
under the right conditions, our biology will be self-healing. And our job is not to do that healing or try to think that I am the healer, but to actually find the conditions in which the biology begins to catalyze its
Mm.
own self-healing
Hmm.
momentum.
Hmm. I love that. And I love that there's this aspect of choice in there too. You said choosing the environment, and just, and there's this sense of surrender and allowing that I'm hearing you as you're, describing this process, that we're so conditioned for doing, and as you know, I work in the energy realms, and it feels like nothing is happening sometimes. People are like, well, nothing's happening. Well, no, things are reorganizing on a different level, on a level that's outside of your awareness. And that's what I'm hearing you talk about, is that there's this innate wisdom of the body, of natural systems, and how do we align with that and create the opportunity for that to work on its own.
Yeah, that's right. And we train people to recognize the environments in which I need to be doing things, and then
Mm-hmm.
the environments that I can simply surrender into.
Mm-hmm.
And making those wise choices is really key, because some might say, "Oh, I'm like it's unwise to surrender to substance abuse."
Mm-hmm.
Right? We actually have to do something there. We have to get busy. We have to get help,
Right.
and there's aspects of surrender as well, but you really have to be doing things.
Mm-hmm.
But for me to find the right trajectory, to find the right map so that I can recognize where I am, it's really key. And
Mm-hmm.
we use we created a three-phase map that says many of us start in chaos.
Right.
And it's like being in a fog, and I don't know which way to go, really.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I'm making choices, but our biology is not only wanting to have us grow and develop, it mostly actually wants us not to die.
Right. Yeah. The number one
And
imperative. Don't
right,
die.
right. And for our biology, that also means, strangely, don't change.
Right.
Don't fundamentally change, because
Yeah.
whatever is existing is life. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you change that, the biology doesn't have a way to determine if that
Mm-hmm.
change is going to be sort of life-giving or
Mm-hmm.
life-taking.
Right.
And so there's a whole protocol and mapping that we do to
Mm-hmm.
give exact steps for
Mm-hmm.
how you can move from chaos and the fog
Yeah.
into a place where you can begin to make better choices,
Right.
and then where you begin to trust the biology to do its own natural and innate
Yeah.
healing.
As you're describing this space, this is the life-giving space. That's also from the mental and psychological perspective. We also have our mental comfort zone, and that comfort zone is there for the same reason. Like, this is protected space, and I know that I can survive in here, but that space doesn't allow us, like, we have to grow through those edges. We have to make those changes if we want anything, if we want to see change in our lives, if we want to see transformation. It doesn't happen in the comfort zone. Like, just, we've been, I did this for so long and I didn't get any results. So at some point I have to realize, like, I have to lean into this discomfort of the unknown and sit in that place of mystery for a little while. And that's where, like, faith and trust comes in. And obviously, like, having people who have your back. Like, this is not,
Yes.
necessarily advisable to do on your own,
Right. It's so true. And the thing that I think organic intelligence will bring a new paradigm to is that we know that for us to grow, we need the right support.
Mm-hmm.
And what is so remarkable is that the biology provides that support. So, in so many circles, we say, oh, you've got to, in white supremacy work and anti-racism work, um, that's what I mean when I'm talking about white supremacy, is the
Mm-hmm.
recognition among
Yeah.
white people of the white dominance in society. And then that's anti-racism work and uprooting that anti-racism work. But in other circles as well, it's known that people say, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. But at the same time, we also have to say there has to be enough support to
Yes,
experience that.
that's
And
right.
that's the key. And for our biology, that support is ready, waiting, and missed all the time. That all the time,
Mm-hmm.
in all of our experience, there is a prerequisite and readily available support coming. And so
Mm-hmm.
what we train people to do in our therapeutic practice is to see and recognize where those supports are, so that a person can receive enough support
Right.
that then everything begins to change. I've said for many years, one of our sayings is, trauma means unintegrated resource.
Oh, that's such a great reframe.
Right? And yeah, it is the frame, actually. Trauma means unintegrated resource, which means the help is there. It's just being missed. And I'm all the time showing people the Sistine Chapel,
Right.
and the help coming on its way, and the Homo sapiens are just like, oh, I don't know, oranges and is the new black is on, and it's just hard to
Totally.
really get going on the help, but it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting how you're talking about biology, and I just keep getting, like, this is spirit. Like, spirit is infused in our biology, and
Right,
spirit is here holding us the whole entire time. And it's like,
right,
do we, and that could, however you want to define spirit, God, higher source, higher self, spirit, the universe, all that is, like, whatever that is, it's there. And
right,
it's wanting to support us. Like, life supports life. That is the whole objective. And
right,
it's right there. And all we have to do is recognize it, open to it, allow it. And it's working through our biology. It's, working at these higher spiritual levels. And I, as someone who, did experience quite a number of those, the ACE traumas as a child, and, they're unbelievably common, by the way. So if you're not familiar with
right.
the ACE study, for anyone who's listening, it's readily available everywhere out there. Just do ACE, adverse
ACEs,
childhood experience, or ACEs
right,
study, and you'll find, you can understand, like, all of the criteria, what defines an adverse childhood experience. They're quite common. And the
oh
more you
yes,
have, the harder it gets for you, because it's a compounding thing. But one thing that that I found by doing my own healing work was that trauma is a doorway into something else, and that we can really heal, and we can really create a different reality on the other side of that healing. Like the trauma it is what it is, and it happened, and I can't change it. But what it allowed me to do in my life by actually coming into it and actually looking at it and being with it and working with it was that it changed everything for me. And so can you talk about what you see in people when they do the trauma work? You must have so much experience and so many stories to share, but what do you see as the opportunity of trauma?
Yeah, well, like you say, the first is to realize that we all have it. The ACEs
Yeah.
studies is just the tip of the iceberg, and
Mm-hmm.
really we look back to trauma as almost a red herring. That is, the issue really is the way that our biology has become so significantly dysregulated and disorganized, and that happened for our species somewhere at about somewhere on the path where we stopped being hunter-gatherers and we started to do civilization and
Mm-hmm.
large land masses and so on of people together, larger cities and groupings. And we left our native environment in which our biology had been nested and evolved to live in, and then we like moved into a box,
Right.
with false suns
Mm-hmm.
and our biology for a million years and more was evolving to live in that environment, and then all of a sudden, boom, we just left that environment, and now our biologies are suffering the ills of this like accidental domestication,
Yeah.
and that means that our
Yeah.
biologies are not haven't caught up to how we're living right now, and that's
Yeah.
stress, and that means we've all got it. So the
Right.
trauma, the big T trauma, is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Our systems haven't seen normal in 15,000 years,
Mm-hmm.
and so we've got some catching up to do, and again,
Yeah.
that's the challenge and that's the opportunity.
Yeah. So many of my guests this time, it actually somewhat surprised me. It was one of the hidden kind of heavy hitters of this series was how deeply important nature connection is to our well-being.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, okay, we live in this box, but we still need to go outside, and it's available to you. Even if you're in the city, like there's a park, there's a tree growing, there's whatever, there's the sky above you. If you can't see dirt beneath your feet, the sky is always there. The moon is always there. The sun is always there. And to actually use your intention to unwind some of this accidental domestication, which is this biological trauma that we're all experiencing, just to create some sort of nature connection is so profound.
Yeah, it's our home.
Mm-hmm.
And nature is our home. It's
Mm-hmm.
even bizarre in a way that we would be talking about nature because we are nature.
Right. I
Like,
know it's such a
right?
bizarre.
Right?
It's like, wait,
Right?
wait.
Oh, I'm going to go to nature. I'm going to get some contact with nature. It's like it used to be that it was all nature,
Right.
and now we're like it really bespeaks just how
Yeah.
far from.
Right. Yeah. Nature is now the other, right? It's outside of
Yes.
ourselves. It's like, well, wait a
Yes.
second.
Mm,
When
yes.
did that happen? Oh yeah, 15,000
Yes.
years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So I personally like have a saying that it's not quite a well-formed saying, but I bet you are going to agree with me that I would be overjoyed. Like trauma is what keeps me in business. And I would be absolutely overjoyed to be out of business because trauma was healed. So I
Yeah.
imagine that you might feel the same way.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Yes. Oh, and there's no risk to our livelihoods.
Unfortunately.
They're making trauma faster than we can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. So and we are trying to shift that paradigm. We're trying to work at all the levels
Yeah.
of social enterprise, economic support, the work, in building communities, the work in also understanding the biology, training the helpers.
Right.
We're here to help the helpers because then they can go out and they can train and help, and still
Yeah.
we believe it'll be a multi-generation approach with uncertain outcome. You know, and we lean
Yeah.
heavily on this notion that is called nishkam karma, which is this nishkam karma. It's a Sanskrit term that means basically life as art, which is
Mm,
to be able to behave and respond instinctively and spontaneously to the moment,
yeah.
but without attachment to the outcome.
Right.
Right? To
Right.
be able, that's
Yeah.
nishkama karma. So our aim is to enjoy this life energy that we have, this gift, and wow, I'll enjoy it more if there are more people enjoying life.
Hmm.
And it's sort of this, enlightened self-interest that it's going to be more fun if the party is bigger, and if everybody
That's
has
right.
plenty to eat, and we have lots to share. There's more joy the more we share.
Totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And that's really that's kind of the new earth that we're creating, right? It has to start inside of ourselves. And it is sort of this self-interested drive to feel less pain, to feel, less suffering, to get out of suffering, or to feel openness, to feel connected, all of those things.
Yes.
But guess what? Like when we get that good vibe feeling inside because we've been doing our work and healing that stuff, it makes things better for everybody else too. And that's how we
Yeah.
create this new earth. And
Yeah.
I'm with you. It's going to take some time, but I also take a lot of hope from how aware young children are compared to, just even my growing up and my parents' generation. Like human beings are coming out of the womb much more aware that, at a faster pace. Humanity really is evolving. And at some point, we are going to have perhaps more enlightened parents than unenlightened parents. And that's like when things are really going to, I think, pop over. And because so much, I agreed, is coming out of these childhood experiences. Although, even one of the healers that I have worked with, reminded me that just birth itself is traumatic. And again, that can also go back to the way that we bring babies into the world and in our medicalized system
Yeah,
relative
it
to
is.
how animals have been bringing babies into the world for millions of years. It's a very different thing, which is not to say we don't need hospitals, but that there are more enlightened ways of bringing a child into the world. Like women should not be laying down. That's not like that doesn't make sense to like use gravity, for instance. And so there's just certain, kind of paradigm shifts that I think are going to happen. We'll find out.
Yeah, we have a free program called Clinical Mindfulness, and in that, one of our members, Michelle Borick, is a midwife, and really
Cool.
talks about exactly this. Like, oh, here are some new paradigms for how birthing can happen and
Hmm.
non-medicalized birthing, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be intense, but it doesn't have to be traumatic,
Right.
really.
Right. Intensity does not equal trauma.
Yeah.
It's just trauma is our inability to process certain intense things. Like trauma results from that. But yeah, intensity is not necessarily a bad thing. It's part of the human experience. Sometimes it can be a joyful thing, but
For sure.
can you tell us about your course that you offer, The End of Trauma? I'm pretty curious about it.
Yeah, well, it's called the end of trauma because we believe that the whole notion of trauma is having people take their eyes off of what's really important, which is these resources that are coming from our biology all around for healing. And it's not, again, we're very focused on addressing the problems of the world. We're not glossing over that from poverty and disenfranchisement to global climate change. We're in the game on that. But we recognize that the pathway to that is this notion of the auto-organizing system. Our biology, under the right conditions, will be auto-organizing, and to help us bring our attention to the signals from our own systems itself that are going to be organizing. That's our task. That's the job. And so we have this notion that the job is enjoyment, right? The pleasure
Uh-huh.
activism. This is our work, is to actually realize and integrate the resources that are coming hand over fist. And so to deal with anxiety and depression, panic, and also, you know, we work with a lot of folks with chronic illness,
Mm-hmm.
including chronic fatigue and so on,
Yeah.
that you really have to begin with building the organism and the stability of the biology itself.
Mm.
And so the end of trauma course takes us through 10 weeks of study and practice with a workbook where you have morning and afternoon exercises, you have daily videos, you have teaching videos, and then meditation videos, where we begin to learn to counter and work with the tendency of the biology to focus on what's wrong. It's called the
Mm-hmm.
negativity bias. And that
Mm.
negativity bias keeps us stuck and fixated
Yes.
on things like trauma
Yeah.
and on what's wrong,
Right.
and then keeps our system actually stuck in its same pattern and
Yes.
consistently
Yes.
reinforces the status quo.
Absolutely. Oh, that's brilliant. That's so brilliant. That's so true. We focus so much on everything that's quote unquote wrong, and so much is available to us when we can start to shift that mindset. I totally believe that. I totally agree with you. That's awesome. And
Yep.
so this course sounds really great. And I understand for our audience, you have a free offering for us, which is actually a portion of this course. You want to talk
Yep.
about that?
That's for sure. So I'll share my screen for just a moment. It's a 10-week course, and in each of those weeks, we're learning tools that are based in the way the biology wants to stabilize itself.
Mm,
And so we're gaining these tools to be able to stabilize our own systems and then turn it. You know, there's this negative spiral that's happening.
yeah,
And then the tools that we have stop that negative spiral and then begin to build back in the other direction. And so
brilliant.
we practice, and every week we're practicing on a new skill, all with exercises every week. So what your guests will have and what everybody here can have is the first week that gives you that overview and that framework. And
Great.
we call it the ISOMA framework. And that stands for image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect. And we
Uh-huh.
take each week, we study each of these, and we begin to practice looking for the biological signal, or the biologically derived signal that is the signal for our growth and development and support, and begin to help us integrate those signals, because trauma means unintegrated resource, and the resource is coming from each of these. Our images
Mm-hmm.
and sensation, orientation is connecting to the exterior environment, and also the meaning, the cognitions, and affects. So yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. So you're using some reflection and inquiry focused on the biology and what the signals your biology is sending you. That's great.
Yep, those
That's,
self-organizing signals. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
that's fantastic. Wow, fantastic. Well, thank you. I think I could probably talk to you all day about all of this stuff.
Yeah, me too.
So we'll probably have to schedule a round two sometime. But thank you so much, Steve. This was just really enlightening, and just really a very comfortable conversation to have with you around something that is oftentimes not quite so comfortable.
Right?
So
Trauma. Yeah.
yeah, it's not, but take heart, dear audience, the end of trauma is possible, and you can radically change your life when you get this right. If I can do it, anyone can do it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Lovely. It's such a pleasure. Thank you.